Welcome to That's Good Parenting, the podcast where we search for simple steps to reduce parenting stress. I'm your host, Dory Durbin, children's book author, illustrator, book coach. I love to help experts, educators, coaches, kids size their big ideas into meaningful stories that families can grow with. But today I'm joined by someone who understands the very complex life of family from every angle. Mindy Green is a certified parent coach, as well as a parent and a grandparent who has herself experienced the joys and challenges of raising kids. Mindy took her own experiences and expertise and kid-sized them into a children's picture book, Sammy's Super Stretchy Shoelaces. And I was the lucky one who got to coach and illustrate her book. So today's conversation is a super special one. So welcome, Mindy.
Hi, Dory. I'm so glad to be back with you.
I'm a little biased, but I adore your book and the concept. And so I'm really excited to share this with our listeners. I know, Mindy, that every powerful story has a reason for its beginning. And I know that Sammy's Super Stretchy Shoelaces was one that really came from your heart, from your perspective as a parent, as a grandparent, and as a coach. So, what made you think that there needs to be this specific children's book in the world?
Oh, well, there are a couple of reasons, and I'll say the biggest reason though is my grandson. My oldest grandson was having some issues with his own shoelaces, and each time he would tie them, he would end up in tears because they were just seemed like they were getting longer and longer. They were stretching out, and so he was so frustrated, and we ended up having to triple knot them just so they would stay tied. And so he and I came up with this idea, and we thought that would make a really fun story. So he dictated to me, and I typed it out, and then he illustrated the book, and he still has that today. But then we were talking, I was like, you know what? I bet other kids would really resonate with this. And so that's when we decided that I would explore my options, and I came across you.
And I was so lucky to be able to come across you with the same idea. It was awesome. And Kai, your grandson, is just delightful and creative. And I love that this story was something that he helped craft. I think that gives it just even more of an authenticity of the frustration that kids go through learning to tie their shoes, much less having shoestrings that won't stay tied after they tie them. So
Absolutely. Yes.
I thought it was neat too, and I don't know if you ever connected this, but the idea of the stretchiness with the emotional flexibility and the physical stretchiness of shoestrings. I thought that was a really cool parallel that whether it was intentional or not, it is definitely there in the book.
I had thought about it at different times, and I don't know that I've really ever articulated it as well as you just did, because it's really our patience is stretched, and we'll say, or it's wearing thin. And so those are phrases that we have about patience, and we don't often think about it. And so you're right that the stretchy shoelaces are really a great analogy for what happens with us when we get really frustrated, and we're having to learn patience and how to deal with these big emotions that really can feel like they're stretching us as people.
Yeah, I love the other thing that you did with the story that not very many people choose to do with kids' books, and that's embed kind of a mystery into the story itself. So you have his frustration growing, but there's also this mystery that's getting more complex and causing the frustration to even develop even further. Do you want to talk just a little bit, but don't give it away, just a little bit about it?
Yeah, no, and I won't give it away, but I'll say that this is my spin on it because I really love mystery books, and I always have ever since I was very young. And so I thought, why don't we make it a little bit more interesting? And help us like to figure out like the problem solving. And so the mystery is a bit like problem solving, right? Because you're gathering clues and trying to figure out like why this is happening. And along with that, then as the curiosity of Sammy grows, and as I was talking to Kai about it, one of the things that really struck us is that this is a really great way then to learn how to be more patient and to get curious about like, well, why is this happening and what can I do differently? And so that's where the big surprise comes at the end, which is just like a fun little take on what could be happening.
Yeah, and I love so the way I look at this, and maybe you can revise this for me if I'm not hitting it, but I look at this as you must have clients who have kids who experience high levels of frustration that parents sort of don't know what to do. Is that true?
It is, yes. And I'm thinking back to when my kids are all young adults now. And I'm thinking back to how each one of them, like, I didn't know if they were ever going to learn how to tie their shoes. And so, and as a parent, you go through it and you go through it and you go through it. And you just think, well, at some point they're going to get this. But then there's that little niggle that you have of doubt. And you're like, is this really going to happen? And so I think this is something that parents can relate to as well as the frustration. And how do we stay calm when we're having to repeatedly, teach something and hoping that they get that skill while wondering, is it really going to stick?
That's so true. There's so many different levels of that too as they get older. I mean, shoe tying
Hmm.
is definitely a challenge. I remember potty training was similar.
Oh, yes.
This child will never use the public bathroom ever. And the same thing, the shoes is frustrating too because usually when you put your shoes on, what are you trying to do? You're trying to leave. And,
Right.
and so there's a time element with that too.
Absolutely. And it's like with anything, it's with any new skill that, we're teaching our kids or our kids are learning, right? So it could be zipping up their coat. I remember I have one child who, would have a hard time like trying to, the coat would be inside out and trying to figure out like are the arms in or out or whatever. And so it's for us learning to be patient and also to better like to give better instruction and support because I know that like you said, especially with shoe tying, there's a time limit and you're getting on your shoes typically because you're trying to get out the door and you want to do that in a pretty quick fashion, and so there's not a lot of extra time built into that. And there really at this point needs to be when they're learning a new skill, whether it's shoe tying or as they get older too. It's like, learning how to organize themselves, their backpacks, getting their homework done, whatever it is. It's like the lessons that are shared in this book apply to all kinds of things throughout our children's lives and our lives too.
I love that. Yeah, I was just thinking like as kids get older, we refer to persistence in a way that we kind of expect it, but it really starts really early, much
Yeah.
earlier than most of us give kids credit for.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Because it's easy and I think this is sometimes too, and I'm going to tell on myself here, but when my kids were younger, it's like they were in like the not they didn't have lace shoes, they had the straps. And because some of that was just for expediency of time, it's like we needed to get out the door. And so they knew how to tie shoes, but they didn't always have to do it very often because I was like, oh, we'll try this. But then it's a skill that they need to have. So then it's like at some point you need to go back and really make sure that they know how to do that.
That's so true. Yeah, they go to school and that's an expectation, right?
Yeah.
That's absolutely. It's interesting too. I had shifting this just a little bit. I was thinking about Kai with his drawing this experience for him and how he really thought about what it felt like to be in that situation and verbalized it through the story, but also through the art itself.
Yes.
That had to be really powerful for him. Did you see it that way too?
I did, yes, because and I felt this way too, and I know I might be jumping a little ahead with this, but it ties together, and it's the like even as you were drawing, and asking questions about the pictures and what I wanted and what did I want the focus to be on, like that spotlight, and that's what I saw Kai going through, as we wrote our very simplistic book about this in his drawings, and he's like, I really want to show how long the shoelaces are and like that they get tangled and I'm like tripping over them and then figuring out how to triple knot because it's like it's one thing to tie them, but then you have to figure out how to double tie and then triple tie. And so he really wanted to capture that. And that really, to me, spoke to like the how pictures tell the story too.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually part of what I was going to talk to you about was, you had this story vision, and as we worked through it, we didn't really change a lot in your story text itself. We did some
Mhm.
changes, but you really kind of had this written story pretty well finished off. And then we started to work through the art, and I was curious, first of all, what it was like to actually see what Sammy looked like after the first few times, and then second, to make the decisions that you had to make in the book. How did that feel?
I'm going to say that I was going to say I was sweating a lot, but for women, what do we say? We glisten. So I was really glistening through this because, it's one thing to have the story, like the words, and I'm a word person. I love words and I love playing around with them. I'm curious about them. How does this look? How does this sound? How does this, what emotion does this evoke? And so that part I really enjoy. And so then we got to the artistic part of it. Like, well, so what does Sammy look like? And you asked a lot of questions. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I know the answers to this because in my head I had a picture, but I didn't know how that would translate into like an actual picture and the colors and what do the pictures convey that maybe aren't in the word, in the text itself. And so that was the part that I would say stretched me, stretched my thinking, my imagination, like what should be taken from the text, but then also where do we go? How do we interpret some of that and allow that to be in the pictures? And so I would say working with you and that questions that you asked there, and you would give me homework at times, and I was like, oh, I don't know how, and so I'd have to really give it some thought. And I would say again, I mean, no better way to say it than I was really stretched through that, and I really ended up enjoying the process as much as sometimes I would dread like trying to figure out like, well, what should I do here? And that's where, a good coach really comes in and you help me through those times that I had no idea.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I love that we keep using these shoe string puns in the middle of it. It's not on purpose, folks. It's just so natural. I was gonna say we got it all tied up, but I thought maybe that'd be
Yes, we did.
so. What I think was really cool about Sammy's character is you and I kind of talked through what you wanted the family to look like. I mean, we got Sammy first, but we kind of modeled that a little bit off of your own grandkids. And then we kind of also said, okay, what does the family look like? What does Winston look like? And we got this image of the family before we ever started designing any of the pages. And I think that
Absolutely.
gave us a good foundation. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I think that knowing who the characters were and having an idea of what they look like then allowed I think anyway, maybe you could speak more to this, but it's like like how they looked on each of the pages, like the setting and what would they be doing because we fleshed out those characters so well, and what their response would be to different things, and the personalities just really came to life.
Yeah, we did. We talked a lot about like what their reactions would be, what would they be doing in situations. And that's important because really you think about it, you've got 32 pages, of which they're not even 32 pages. Like really there's like the title page and the copyright, all that. We try to use every page we can. And you have those pages to tell a story that really you want the kids to feel a part of and have this excitement to turn the page and see the next thing, but also still relate to the characters. And I think that's the fun magic of it. Like neither of us knows in the beginning where this is going to go. We just know that there's the story and we're going to fit these characters into it. And we just kept checking back. Does this kind of convey what you're trying to say in this particular part of the story? I think, right?
Yes, and one of the questions that you asked me early on is how long did I want the book to be? What did I
Mhm.
want it to be? A picture book? Did I want it to be, a reader, or, what was my thought about that? And I really wanted, and I knew this very strongly, that I really wanted it to be a picture book with text, obviously, and so for me, it was like figuring out, well, how much text should there be versus, and what can be said there versus what can also be conveyed through the pictures and the illustrations. And so that was really helpful for me because I think in the beginning I had way too many words. And so what I really enjoyed about the process was you're like, well, this is how we can keep most of them, but then also break them up so that for a child who is like in this age range of 6 to 9, that they could follow along and be able to read and not get lost in a long paragraph of words. So that was really helpful for me, and and knowing that I really wanted the illustrations to tell a part of the story that maybe the words didn't. So I really enjoyed that part of it too.
I think when people come to creating a children's book story, I have very rarely seen anyone bring up 300 to 600 words as their first draft. It's usually 5,000 words and it's super descriptive and it's awesome. And as an illustrator, I love the extra content because I can say, "Hey Mindy, we can draw this on this page and look, it'll take up this much space and then we can cut all of these words out." And until you talk to somebody who can help you do that, it seems like you need all of those words. um,
Right.
so it is part of the process, part of the, call it, gleaning of the content. It's what I always tell people, it's kid sizing. It's like they would be overwhelmed with the content that we want to give them, but if we can do it with words and pictures, then it becomes friendlier and they can read into the message that you're trying to give them, but also relate. So it's kind of a nice blend. And you were super good about it. You weren't crying about me taking words away from your story.
Because I think, again, what you just said is that, that the pictures can tell so much of the story as well. And one of the favorite things that I like about, and I don't know if it's okay to say here, one of my favorite books that I enjoyed reading to my own kids was Gullible's Troubles. And so Gullible is a hamster, and so he really loves soccer. And his name tells you a little bit about his character. He's gullible. And so when he's going to visit with his aunt and uncle and cousin, they get him to do all kinds of crazy things. So there are words involved in this, obviously, but what I love is the pictures because it shows like him, like they say, oh, because he's bothering his uncle. His uncle says, well, go and wash the coal, because they had a coal stove. And so he's washing it. And so it's like you're not reading this as much as seeing in the illustration that what's happening as he's washing this coal. And so it's like I really wanted to bring elements of that in. So when you talked about it, like we don't need words necessarily for this, then I was like, oh, that's why I loved that other book so much.
Yeah, it's funny what sticks with us too, as far as is being that age or even being a parent reading a book over and over again.
Yes.
The cool thing is when you have picture books, and this is part of why I love them so much, the kids could read the book by themselves without the words at the very beginning because they're going to bring to the story their own perspective. And they, maybe we didn't even read the story to them, but they pick the book up and they tell us what it's about from their perspective. And then where the cool part comes in is where the parents read the story and like interact and are able to say, "Oh, did you expect that to happen? What do you think is going to happen next?" And all those pieces that really create that conversation. So
Yes.
you actually have an event coming up very, very soon, your first ever published author, children's book author event. And we were just talking right before this about, how do you present this to kids? What does that look like? And I think sometimes parents are afraid to read picture books to kids because they're worried that the picture books can be over too fast or they're not really sure how to do things. So do you have a couple tips that you would probably suggest to them if they were reading your book, what you would want them to pull out to talk to their kids about?
Certainly. So, first of all, I'm going to say that this is something that I did with my kids when we were reading, when I was reading to them, because each night at bedtime, and even as they got older, we would read age appropriate books. And so, one of the things that we would do is like we would stop at different places and we would look at the pictures and point out little things like those little, what we call now, I guess, Easter eggs, those little surprises that you can see in the pictures. And so, I think for parents, if you can do that with your kids, like talk to them, as you're reading the book, stop for a moment and pause and say, even just asking a question like, I wonder why he got so upset. What was he so frustrated about? Or did you notice, the facial expression or pulling things like that? Because these books are so rich in life and, and what that really looks like. So I can talk about my book, obviously, and I can talk about like the book that I just mentioned in Gullible's Troubles and just seeing these things come to life through the pictures. So use those as guides. And as we just talked about beforehand, like about what I'm going to do because I get to go into a school and I'm actually going to have an opportunity to read this to my grandson Kai's class. And he's so proud. He's so proud. He's like my little marketer in school. And so one of the things that I want to do is I want to pull out a few things like, I want to ask the kids, have you ever struggled with tying your shoes? And how many of you feel like you're really good at it now? And then going through like, maybe well, how would you feel if this happened? And because there's a surprise ending, like, did you have any idea like that was going to happen? That this is who the culprit is or whatever. Those are just some tips to really, for yourself as a parent, look at the book and look at those opportunities, because these are the way that we establish conversation and connection with our kids so that when we get to the big things that maybe not aren't in a book, they may be going through something with a friendship at school, or they might be struggling with, a teacher or their classroom, or it could be anything and everything that happens in family life. You're setting the stage early for how you can have enough conversations with them later about things that seem like they're bigger, but to remember too that whatever age your kids are at, if they're struggling with tying their shoes or zipping their jacket or brushing their hair or remembering to brush their teeth or whatever it is, that we're setting the stage now, and giving them the skills that they need later to be able to problem solve.
Yeah. Mindy, what is the most exciting thing about becoming a children's book author to you?
So this has been my childhood dream. I was probably around Kai's age. Kai is 9. And ever since, I was that age, I always wanted to write my own book. And so at first I thought, maybe it would be like a book for older kids or something. And then like when this story happened, in real life and our experiences, and I had that idea that this could make a good book for children, that's the most exciting part to me is that, I just used a real life example of something and I was able to make it into a book and so I'm going to grab this real quick because I get emotional. And so like when I look at Sammy and I see, that the character that I had in my mind has come to life and my name is on the cover, my picture is on the back, that this is real. And so that's the most exciting part. And I just want to jump up and down and say, I did it.
You did. I think that makes me excited because if this was a lifelong dream that you finally saw come to fruition and you're actually going to take it as a tool and go into schools and show kids that they're not alone, that they can overcome frustration and parents how to do it, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I'm trying to,
No.
for those, I'm trying not to cry right now because it really does mean a lot. And so for anyone, I would say who is considering, you know, um, writing a children's book and working with someone, I can't say enough wonderful the process was, as much as that I had to grow through it too, that it is possible and it is doable. And I'm now in my 50s and I've had this dream since I was 9. If you don't do it right now, that doesn't mean that you can't do it next year or later on. It doesn't have to be right away, but know that at any age you can become a published author, and you can make that dream come true.
Yes. And I think as an expert like you are, do you see added value in having a children's book to use in the future?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a parent coach as well. And so, this is something that it has beyond just, like shoe tying and, this type of thing. There's a little bonus section in the back for parents. And so this, it was something that I had wanted to have in there as well. And it's all about like, how do we use calming techniques, and they could be very simple, like breathing that we can teach our kids and we can use ourselves. And also how do you go through problem solving? And that's something that has relevance to whether you're a parent, a child, or if you're an educator or anyone who works with other people. That these are skills that you can use, and techniques that you can use in anywhere in your life. And so having this book just is like kind of like for me seals it's a good marriage between just something fun literature wise and also something that's very practical.
I love that. All right, I got to ask you a hard question. You know me in questions.
Yes, I do.
So, Mindy, now that Sammy's Super Stretchy Shoelaces is out in the world, what is next for you? Do you have more stories in the work, more with Sammy, or are you going to surprise us?
So I know, Dory, you know the answer to this. And so for the audience listening in, I do have, this is the first in a series. I have at least 3 other books that Sammy and Winston and family are going to be a part of. And then also we are going to be working on a coloring slash activity book that will be an accompaniment to Sammy's Super Stretchy Shoelaces. So, and who knows where else we go from there, Dory, because I have lots of ideas.
I think it's awesome. And I think it's such a great tie for, oh, I did it again, a great tie for kids and families to be able to have an example, see the process, and know that they can make it through it. So, Mindy, where can they find you and your book?
Certainly. So I have, there's a hardcover and a paperback now, and those are both on Amazon. So you can stretch. You can search for me, my author page, and all of those books that I have are on there, or you can look up Sammy's Super Stretchy Shoelaces there. And if you're also wanting more information on parenting tips and techniques, and I also have a free newsletter, you can visit my website at mindygreencoaching.com, and you'll find all kinds of additional resources there, as well as Sammy will be a link there on the website as well.
Awesome. All right, I have one last question for you, Mindy. If you could leave parents and grandparents with one piece of advice for helping their kids stretch through challenges, what would that be?
I would say, please just make sure that you're open to listening to them and observing them. So if you see them struggling with something, that's a good opportunity for a conversation. So if it's simple, like if they're frustrated, let's with their shoelaces, that can be an opportunity for you to say, hey, I noticed you're frustrated. How is it that I can support you? Or what do you need help with? And just really listen to them, because I think for most of us, we want to be seen, heard, and valued. And when you do that, then you create that connection that will last a lifetime.
I love it. I love it. Oh, Mindy, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful book with us and the advice on just connecting with your kids. We're going to put your website and Sammy in our show notes. So if people want to check it out, they can drop to that. I am so excited for you and all that this book is going to bring you and all the connections that you're going to be able to make and tie things together. I think it's awesome.
Thank you, Dory.
Thank you for your time today, Mindy. And that's all for That's Good Parenting today. I do want to remind people that there is That's Good Parenting Club that you can help authors like Mindy shape their books in the future.